And transferred.
All right, and we're live. Okay, cool. Thank you everybody for tuning in. This is the Monday readings for the Second Rainbow Coalition for Comrade Kwame's book, My Search for Answers, Truth and Meaning. Today we will be on chapter 17. And before we get started, I'm going to go ahead and read Second Rainbow Coalition Statement of Unity. There is a preface which outlines, capitalism and so forth, but I'm going to actually start with the actual statement, which continues as: the legacy of the First Rainbow Coalition dates back to its founding on April 4th, 1969, by the original BPP, original Black Panther Party, the original Young Lords, and the Young Patriots Organization. A number of other organizations joined this coalition not too long afterwards, such as the American Indian Movement, AIM, Brown Berets, Rising Up Angry, the Red Guards, and others. Since the founding of the U.S., the United States, the masses had developed a number of popular movements that came together to fight back against this capitalist, imperialist system in various ways, around particular demands. Nevertheless, none had established a movement quite like the First Rainbow Coalition. The historic movement was the first of its kind that established a model of class struggle like no other. Its charismatic leader, Chairman Fred Hampton Sr. of the Illinois chapter of the original Black Panther Party, stated that at the end of the day, we weren't engaged in a quote unquote race struggle. He said, it's a class struggle, goddammit. By uniting the various oppressed ethnicities and masses, we were able to bridge the gap between the various ethnic communities that white supremacy had long sought to keep divided. This class solidarity equipped them with the material basis and class consciousness to see their common class condition. Therefore, the necessity to form a united front against their common class oppressor, the capitalist, imperialist ruling class. The ruling class viewed this as the greatest threat to their class rule, and subsequently used the elite of repressive forces of the state, police, courts, jails, prisons, and intelligence agencies, etc., in order to crush this emerging revolutionary socialist movement. We refounded the Rainbow Coalition on May 14th of 2021 with the intent of upholding the legacy of the original Rainbow Coalition. We believe that the historic example in this model for the United Front will best serve our class liberation. By upholding the 10-point program of the original Black Panther Party, which was subsequently adopted and later expanded by the original Young Lords, the Young Patriots Organization, and all other Rainbow Coalition members, we establish our programmatic unity. The 6 disciplinary rules that we uphold ties all organizations in our coalition to a common professional discipline. History has bestowed upon our generation a common class mission to fulfill. The representatives of the capitalist, imperialist ruling class, represented by the Democratic and Republican Party, cannot liberate us. They never will. It is only their class intention and interest to uphold our common class oppression. Therefore, it is only we, the oppressed masses of all ethnicities and nationalities, who must build the necessary class solidarity, class consciousness, organizational structures, and a united front that will ultimately liberate ourselves. This is what the Second Rainbow Coalition is committed to. This is the historic mission we intend to fulfill. Dare to struggle, dare to win, all power to the people, boots on the ground. All right, all power to the people. Okay. So different people are going to be coming into the chat. So we just did the Statement of Unity. The preface of the Statement of Unity kind of alludes that capitalist is the bonding force that through transsectionality oppresses us all, right? And so with that being said, that's why I read the Statement of Unity and not necessarily so much the preface, because we could read the preface, but I think we all, especially within the Rainbow Coalition, understand what bonds us together. And most of it is capitalism. You could even piggyback off of that and say police brutality and so forth, right? Okie dokie. So chapter 17, the ISP's general population. I'll go ahead and continue reading. And then if anybody would like to read or has anything to say in between, just raise your hand and then we'll call it out. Generally, as we read, I like taking a pause every now and then and just talking about certain things because, as I mentioned to Brother Kwame, it's interesting. Although this book was written, a while back, it's so prevalent to what we experience today.
Yeah.
And so you almost anything we've read in past chapters, you can correlate to stuff that's happening today, right? I mean, you would think he wrote this just yesterday based on things that we keep experiencing. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So chapter 17, ISPs, general population. My first week in general population again was surreal to say the least. It took a number of months for it to fully sink in that I was no longer on any segregation unit. Every week for a month or so, I would wake up in cold sweats from nightmares of being sent back to D East. The dreams were so real that when I woke, I looked around my cell and throughout the bars to see where I was. When I realized I was still in cell 225 in C cell house on the east side, only then could I close my eyes and fall back comfortably to sleep. Those dreams of being sent back to D East persisted until I finally adjusted to being in general population once again. And I remember, I believe it was chapter 14, another chapter that we read upon, how we talked about there is no reformation for these prisoners in there. And I hate to use this analogy, but it almost seems like cattle ranchers herding cattle and just prodding them and being mean to them and and then you're just inflicting more trauma. So then really there is no room for reformation. If anything, you're making it worse, right? And so when he says that, he's having sweats and night dreams and night terrors and all that, I mean, that to me just sounds like classic PTSD. In fact, talking to family that I have that are incarcerated, I mean, that it's a hard pill to swallow, but they know it's never going to change. How sad is that, right?
Right.
Okay, second paragraph, page 189, chapter 17 says, the time I had spent on the segregation units hadn't broken me. I was still willing to stand up against the prison regime and even aid another prisoner if I had witnessed them being assaulted by the guards. As much as I accepted the fate of returning to segregation, if I was faced with a decision to act or not, I still didn't want to endure the psychological, mental, and emotional torture of solitary confinement again. But I had a very long time left in prison. So I knew that wasn't always a very real possibility. I think those dreams were just my subconsciousness telling me to know that I was still in prison and my circumstances could always change at a blink of an eye. So don't forget where I was. It sounds like a coping mechanism, a learning mechanism this brother was dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
One of the good things about being moved to Cecil House was that me and Lay were able to go to the chow hall and write together. I was told that Cecil House was the biggest cell house in the whole state. I'm not sure how true that is, but it housed up to 250 people on the east side where I was being housed, and the same number on the west side of the cell house. It was set up just like DE's, but had a lot bigger, but was a lot bigger, and we all came out with each other when they rolled the cell doors open for chow or rec. I hadn't been around many people since first arriving at Wabash Valley Correctional Facility, and that was only when D Cell House and S Cell House went to outside rec with each other. It didn't take me too long to adjust at all. I think DEs had prepared me in a way to be in general population again since I had gotten being used to being around other people. Even though they weren't, even though there were only 10 other people in our red group, it's crazy to think this now, but getting off of a segregation unit that you had been on for years and being released into a prison general population is aching the feeling like you were getting out, like you were getting out. You know you ain't going home, but the feeling you have is when I'm being released. When people say that lockup, supermax, or segregation units are like being in a prison within a prison, that's exactly what it's like. Getting off of one of those units is like getting released. Those are two different words. Those are two different worlds. Even though you're serving your time out, in the same prison sentence, you're just being released from one world to another in the same bubble. It's crazy, but a lot of guys look forward to the release date, just like how they look forward to getting released from the actual physical prison itself. I was no different in that regard. Gosh, just the level of trauma, like it's crazy. The first week off of D East, me and Lay hit it off when this brother named Crazy, who stayed a few cells down from me, started trouble. Lay stayed on the front half of the 400 range. Whenever we were going down to the chow hall, Crazy and I would normally wait for Lay to make his way down to the bottom range before we all headed over to the chow hall together. The whole time we were in C-Cell house together, we were inseparable. Crazy was also from NAP 2. He came up on the west side in Hoville. By the time I had met him in prison, he was off into some of the same type of stuff I was into. He would read books all the time and had a militant mindset too. He was just more influenced by the Hebrew Israelite sort of teaching mixed with his Black Panther outlet. I was cool with that. I figured as long as we had a common point of unity that we could unite around, our ideological differences wouldn't be a source of division. I figured the more he read, the more we dialogued, I could possibly win him over to Marxism, Leninism, and Maoism. I really wanted to recruit him into the Black Guerrilla Circle. Since we were all being housed in the idle cell house, meaning most of us didn't have prison jobs unless we had a job in the cell house, we were given the longest rec point, period. Right after our lunch, we all headed to the gym for 3 hours of rec. Before meeting Crazy, I had gotten accustomed to training in my cell alone. I had made a homemade punching bag that I would tie to the bars and work on my combinations and stamina for about an hour a day. On D East, I met a guy named Alonzo who taught me how to box. I used to fight southpaw before meeting him, but he conditioned me to fight in an orthodox stance. I started training with him. After Lee, Crazy and I would finish lifting weights in the gym. All three of us would go hit the speed bag for the latter half of our rec period. I think Michigan City was the only prison that had a boxing area where guys could go and work on their boxing skills. They didn't have a boxing ring or anything to that degree, but you could hit the bag and blow off some steam or work on your technique. Back in the day, some of the brothers who had been down for a couple of decades told me that they had boxing competitions for the prison population. It seemed like everywhere I went inside prison, there was a lot of stuff that used to be different. I was part of the generation where everything seemed to have been taken out of prison and was more different. Like I said, this was the first time I had been around free weights. Occasionally, I would hear rumors about them even taking that away from us soon. It's funny that this brother's mentioning that now because um, I unfortunately have family that's incarcerated now, and I mentioned that having access to martial arts or lifting weights or anything like that. And I guess depending on where the person is incarcerated, it has in fact been taken away. Sad to say.
Wow. Wow, that's unfortunate because I find that, for those detainees, it's a way, I wouldn't say escape, but just to get your mind off of the current conditions that you are faced with. I'm sorry, I didn't know I had my video up, but it would be great, to have meaningful recreational programs to help so-called rehab those who are detained. But it seems like the system, which is run, operated by these private companies, is doing whatever they can to really break down the soul of a human and dehumanize them and really have them to to continue their sadistic program in enslaving them, you know.
Yeah,
And it's
that's
like,
exactly what it seems like. Yeah.
yeah, and it's like what brother Ched has said, from his experience. I mean, you can't reform the prisons. If anything, you have to get rid of them. because it doesn't do anything, but trillions of dollars are being poured continuously into this system, that's breaking down the human, costing the family so much money, costing taxpayers to pay a lot of money, and it's just building their wealth. And we wonder why we as a country don't have no money, because it's all going to either that or the funeral business.
Oh, that's yeah, right, right. Oh,
Mhm.
and you know what's interesting is, I can't forget that 13th Amendment, and with, for those of us that like have medical backgrounds, you would
Right,
think like, why wouldn't they want quote unquote incarcerated or prisoners, incarcerated folk or whatever to be healthy? Because then healthy people are easier to maintain in terms of
mhm,
health, right? So then
right.
if they're easier to maintain in terms of health, then you would think fiscally it wouldn't take as much money to manage them. But I still fall back to an elder from Maine telling me one time that sick people are big business.
Oh yes, yes,
And
and this is what
remember,
we yeah, and this is what we see, since we are healthcare providers, professionals, that a lot of our people who are ill, um, is like a commodity for those who operate pharmaceutical businesses. And I nearly passed out just seeing how much these CEOs are making. So it's not a I wouldn't say it's more of the health of the people. And I'm saying this because, the reason why people that's in this industry don't care about the health of the people. What they trying to do is profit more out of their life, that they could sustain and building their wealth, while it's killing us as individuals and people and do away with us. It's like being indispensable, throwing us away, because it's not about the dignity of humanity, but how much you can profit out of that. And it's something that we need to do to amend the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, which of course the Constitution is not even designed for indigent people, but for those elite individuals. So I just see that like slavery. I mean, they're gonna get the most that they can, and they don't give a damn what happened to you. Same thing in funeral business that's marketable. Same thing that's in the pharmaceutical industry, where you don't even need a degree in medicine or healthcare. You just need a BSA or a BA. Not a BSA, but a BA. In business.
yeah,
Period.
yeah, it's funny. It's almost like again, capitalism rears its ugly head. And
Oh
like you
yeah,
said, sister, it's all about
money.
that almighty greenback. Like they don't care about the people, obviously.
Of course, yes, yes. And it's unfortunate, but it's up to the people where the power is to change that. And it just reflect on what's happening now. I mean, our country is broke, but yet you have the president who's given another $100 billion to overseas to Ukraine, and yet we have a growing population of people living in the tents in every single city nearest us. And I'm like, it's nerve wracking, as well as it's unfortunate that we are allowing um, a foul and evil system like capitalism really putting us in a situation where we all are in prison. We may not have bars in front of us, but we all are in prison and incarcerated by the system.
That's right. Yeah, no, that's
Huh?
exactly right.
Could I add a little something to that?
Yes,
Oh,
please.
Hi, everyone. I apologize. I was a few minutes late, but I am here.
right,
Um, so I just wanted to add to that. When we speak of slavery, um, slaves were barely kept alive.
Mm,
It was the minimum. you know, to keep them alive and just alive enough to be able to do what was expected of them. And when we talk about, you know, people that are incarcerated, it's the same thing, you know. So to take away programs and to take away things such as, you know, going out into the yard and getting some sun, taking away the windows, taking away any color inside the building, you know, the weights, things like this, it's the same thing. You know, I think of Dr. Amos Wilson in a lot of his videos that I've watched where he speaks. He always goes back to this quote: "The more things change, the more things stay the same." And that's kind of what this makes me think of, is that it's the same thing. It's still slavery. It just looks different. It gives the notion that there's something different about it. And so, you know, if you were to go out and ask 100 random people somewhere, you know, just pick a place and just you know, just ask them, does slavery still exist today? How many of those people would say yes?
Right.
Very
and you know
few
what?
people.
Yeah, and it's the same method, it's the same process, although as you say, it's different, a different situation where you know, control the mind, and the body will follow, which is the Willie Lynch method, you know, and that's what it is. And that's what we see continuously, even now, and in prisons, you know.
Right.
And you know what? And I'm just want to just mention briefly, I just cannot believe that, but then again, I can, that Texas is the one state that have the highest number of people on death row, and you know, killing a lot of people, which is 589, 581 people that they had killed. And there are still other states that really advocate capital punishment. And the latest state is Virginia, where, you know, it's unfortunate, you know. I just had to put that out there.
Right. It's amazing that in this day and age we still have that.
And it makes me wonder, like, to piggyback off of what Sister Vettel said, it makes me wonder, like, how many people know the 13th Amendment and like what it says. Like, I have to be honest, in my own humanness, I knew that it alluded to slavery still being withheld or upheld rather. But like, it wasn't until we read it, I was like, damn, it's just so blatant. Like, how many people did not know this?
Yeah, but you know what? It's very good, especially from every revolutionary. And I'm gonna see. Let me put my video on. I'm gonna see if I can find where I can get some free books. Can you see this? No, it's
Right there again.
now you can see it. Yeah, it's the Constitution book. It's very small and something that carry with you, learn it. You know, it applies to law, though it really doesn't apply to us, but it can be our form of immediate legal weapon against how we are being mistreated as citizens. And you know, and it also, and here it talks about the 13, 14, 15 amendments that we need to acquaint ourselves with and know what is happening, and still active here that we need to amend. So if no one has this, please make it your duty to get this, you know, read it, become familiar with it, especially see if you can memorize it.
Absolutely.
That's dope. If you have any reference links, Sister Anna, if you could drop them in the comments, because that seems really cool.
Yeah, you know, I got this. See, one thing I do, I go to not to stray away on what we have to importantly read, but I'll go to all these little free community events, and they have a whole bunch of giveaway. Even when you'd be surprised, even when law enforcement have these little events, go to them. Go to them, get the material, so this way you can use it for your interest, for your rights, and this is where I got this from,
Interesting. Wow.
so I would definitely look into that, brother, and if I could get a handful of all of that, I'm gonna start sending it out.
I know
Yes.
that the ACLU, the American Civil Liberty Union, which is a group of like very progressive leftist lawyers. I know that if you go to the ACLU.org website, you could get know your rights trainings, and you can get little know your rights cards. So like if you ever get pulled over by police, or for like us as Chicanos, like immigration or whatever, it literally will tell you like, this is what they have to do if they say they want to search your car. Like, this is what you can do. You can record the police. They're very pro filming the police. I know that there's some states, like I think
Oh, they've been
Florida.
amendment.
Yeah,
They
they
have been
enacted like
amendment.
you got to stay apart so far, or whatever. But
Not only that,
ACLU,
right, that's really good. But I know in some states now they're trying to make it illegal for you to film
that's right.
them. And
That's right.
now I understand. I think it's only not only my state, but I think my state is included, which is Virginia. You cannot sue the police if they are wrong of what they did to our brother George Floyd
Yeah.
and Ty Nicholson. You cannot sue them. So
Yeah.
they are doing whatever they can to legalize what they are doing as far as brutal attacks on citizens and kidnapping citizens off the street. But you
Yeah.
are absolutely right, brother. So if you can put that information in the
Yeah.
link, that would be great as well. And I'm gonna start searching tonight on what we can do and post what we need to know, as comrades, so this way we are protected.
Definitely. Definitely. Okay,
Mhm.
y'all. I'm gonna go ahead and continue. Um, One of the freedoms that I enjoyed at Michigan City was being able to work on my MMA skills. I watched UFC fights ever since it first started. One of my favorites had been the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Hall of Famer Royce Gracie. He would get me, he would get in the ring with guys 2 times his size, and before the fight was over, he would have them tap in an armbar, a rear naked choke, or some other submission move before he placed them in. I had always wanted to be as diverse as him. I got the chance to work out and cut and at a rec while I was in Michigan City. The circumstances that brought about was a little comical. I had a run up on this brother that had many brothers known by name in the penitentiary. He was known for his MMA skills. After this particular incident that transpired between him and I would too, in the most direct way. We were in the weightlifting area when I called myself running up on him and placing him in a bear hug. With reflexes of Royce Gracie himself, I just remembered him slapping my hoid and reversing the situation on me. I ended up on the ground lying next to the 45-pound plate racks. I was literally inches away from losing one of my eyes on the ground. Luckily for me, I went far enough away where I didn't hit my head on that metal weight rack. After he led me up, all I could do was be thankful I still had my eye. But it also made me want to learn that skill that he had so proficiently used against me. And that's when he told me and my guys that he would have one of his students named Loco to start training us. From that day forth, after we finished hitting the weights, me, Crazy, and Lee would meet up with Loco and he would teach us MMA techniques for the remainder of the rec period. And I'll just piggyback off of that right quick. Being the oldest of nothing but sisters, my sisters are no joke, man. They are the ones that exposed me to everything. I mean, my God, don't ever piss off a brown woman. Like I remember in the 90s, boxing was king. Everybody was Mike Tyson. And then my younger sisters, I say younger, they're like in their 30s now or whatever. When MMA started coming up, BJJ, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which is like more like grappling and ground fighting, they were like, oh yeah, that's great because whenever women get attacked, no matter how big the size, they're always taken to the ground. And I'll never forget saying, oh, really? And they just turned me into a plate of pizza dough. I mean, they bend me in
Oh my
different
God.
ways. And my sisters are way littler than me. And so I remember thinking, my
Mhm.
God, that is so effective. And ever since that, especially with my little girls, of course, I don't want to sound paternalistic, but I am a father too. They've always practiced the ground fighting skills and other things as well too, because it's so fortunate. But I think when you are seen as prey and you fight back, you're left alone. You are
Yeah.
most definitely left alone. And it sucks for us as Black, brown, and indigenous people because we are peaceful.
Hmm.
We don't really like to resort to that, but I think it's definitely a skill that we should all have and use.
Yeah, and you know what? I just want to add to what you're saying, brother. That's the reason why when I come across these videos that shows a line of self-defense, um, for even those who look vulnerable, who can be petite in size and height. I mean, these videos really are, a necessity to actually help train you, because you'd be surprised that you more of a weapon than the weapons that you carry. Because although you can have something like a can of mace on you or some pepper spray or whatever, that thing can ricochet and you can even, spray your own
Yeah.
self in the eye. But when I went to this one introduction class, you know what? One of the instructors has said, use what God has given you, use it.
Mhm.
So it's
Mhm.
about how you're going to use that. And one thing you have to do is first of your line of defense is to know your surrounding, and don't be so gullible to see
Mhm.
something that's innocent that is a setup or a trap to get you. Go with your instincts,
Mm.
so I would definitely going to, if with permission of everybody and brother Kwame, I would like to go ahead and post those self-defense minute videos. So you welcome to go on the Bernard Facebook site, and obtain that information for your own information.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. It's interesting. I was watching a show a few years back with my teenage son. I forgot the name of the show, but it was like on the History Channel, and it talked
Hmm.
about like the history of like different weapons and all that. And our Filipino brothers and sisters, just with a hardened bamboo stick called an eskrima stick, they were able to repel Spanish conquistadors, not once, not twice, for years, as they
Wow.
tried to invade the Philippines. And you remember the Spaniards, as colonizers at the time, had body armor, horses, they had muskets, they had rifles. I believe they were called harlebus. They had swords, they had invented chainmail, and yet these comrades in the jungle were able to just repel them with just a wooden stick. And so they were showing the fighting style and how that stick is very hard to break. And even though it's a hardened wood, it's like 3 times the strength of steel. And I
Hmm.
remember thinking, see, it's all really in your mind and what is available to you. Like you said, sister, whatever God gives you, grab it and use it. I mean, um,
Right.
unfortunately, there may come a day where we need to do that.
Yeah, of course. And we got to think about it, because you know what? A lot of people are buying guns now, excuse me, arms now, and it's very a slow or short supply on bullets,
Yeah,
you
that's right.
know?
Yeah, that's right.
Well,
All right, I shall continue. So, as long as we placed a blue mat on the floor in a secluded area, the rec staff would leave us alone. We would grapple and wrestle as much as we wanted without getting written up for horseplay or fighting. No other prison I had been to or would go afterwards allowed shit like that to take place. When I say Michigan City was the most liberal prison I ever been to, I meant that. A lot of times they left us alone. I'm not saying that we didn't get into it with the guards a lot there too, but some of the petty shit other prisoners would trip on, they wouldn't. There were a lot more black guards on from the hood that worked there. However, I still carried it as a us versus them mentality because I knew they would fuck us up and be on some pig ass shit too. It was just a more liberal spectrum of freedoms that we enjoyed there compared to other joints. Every day we practiced with local. He would teach us stand up and submission techniques. Since I had been working on my boxing skills for months already, I had enjoyed working on our submission techniques more. After a while, I got so good at putting someone in an armbar, rear naked choke, or guillotine choke that I grew comfortable being on my back and someone on top of me. That was new for me because anytime I had been in actual fights, I tried my best to never allow someone to get on my back. I figured if I was going to lose in a fight, I would find myself in that position first. Now I felt more effective offensively, won and win. The way he taught us was very dialectical. For every offensive strike, it could be turned into a defensive position, and every defensive position could be transitioned into an offensive counter. Because I had a growing understanding of dialectical materialism philosophically, the way he taught mixed martial arts, it helped me to think more fluidly as it applied to fighting. Every position gave rise to new internal contradictions, and every one had the potential to turn into an opposite. Therefore, the more you were able to see every moment as a transition to something else rather than viewing it as absolute black and white in terms of winning or losing, offense and defense, an advantage or disadvantage, etc., you would maneuver more fluidly and not feel defeated or the victor prematurely. That's pretty interesting. I'm not saying that there's no such thing as an offensive and defensive, because dialectical materialism says that everything has an identity while also forming a unity of opposites. It is that internal contradiction that gives any phenomenon its self motion. When a person watches a boxing match or MMA fight, since every position carries within the potential of being transitioned into the opposite, this is why we say that offensive, defensive, although real states temporarily in time itself, aren't permanent in some absolute sense. This is one of the ways that dialectical materialism began informing my life through its application. I think BJJ, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, is just a great example of how people demonstrate the application of it, even though they aren't conscious of that philosophical term. Nonetheless, this became our routine for the next couple of months while we were all in Cecil House together. I wanted to forge myself into a disciplined, well-rounded revolutionary, akin to George Jackson, who studied and constantly trained his body with mixed martial arts too. To build up my stamina, I participated in the prison basketball league that they had recently started. I wasn't lifting weights, hitting the big bag and speed bag, or working on my MMA techniques, then I was playing pickup games or playing basketball games under the whistle. Around the end of November, beginning December, a brother named Fatty L had asked me if I would be interested in participating in the Kwanzaa cultural celebration that was coming up at that time. At that time, I had never considered participating in Kwanzaa due to the controversial history surrounding its founder, Ron Karenga. I think it was in Elaine Brown's book, A Tale of Power, where she spoke about how Ron Karenga and his U.S. organizations, aka the United Slaves, were involved in the assassination of the original Black Panther Party leaders, John Huggins and apprentice Bunchy Carter. January 17, 1969, on the campus of UCLA, some accounts made it seem as if Ron Karenga and his cultural naturalist organization were working with the FBI to kill these two Panther leaders. For a long time, that's what I assumed until I met Geronimo G. Haga Pratt's nephew, Kwabena, years later. He told me that the FBI had instigated the confrontation between the Panthers and the U.S. organization. Since it was a fact that Geronimo was a Panther who had firsthand knowledge of the incident, I figured that his nephew, Kwabena, knew better than I did. Other original Panthers say otherwise. I'm not sure myself. I can almost see that. I can almost see that because to me, the BBP was one of the more revolutionary organizations, and
Mhm.
actually in almost every organization, even to this day, it's a known fact that a lot of the alphabet gang, FBI, CIA, or whatever, infiltrated the Black Lives Matter movement, right?
Yeah.
They're doing it now. They have always been doing it. I think the threat of uniting people of color, uniting the masses, for whatever reason, is a threat to the establishment, and they will do whatever they can to dissolve it, whether it's infiltrate or pit one against
Of
the
course.
other. I mean, historically, that's what's happened, in my opinion,
Right.
and it continues to happen. So I totally
Right.
believe that.
Because it's opposite. what, you know, the revolutionaries are doing, as we all know, is something that a lot that deals with socialism that will
Mm-hmm.
what put a threat to capitalism. So they will do whatever they can to defend that foul system, you know, which going to self-destruct anyway. But yeah, I
Right.
mean
Right.
the alphabet, the alphabet boys going to do whatever they can. And I must admit, honestly, this is revelation to me because I know there's a lot of issue with the founder himself, and which I say I just look at us honoring our ancestors, because at the on the flip side, I mean, if we just look at the individual instead of the actual culture event itself, it's like we are more focused on that individual. And really, when it comes to the mission, as far as liberating our people or honoring our ancestors, we have to look at, you know, the big picture, the mission of what we are doing, than just the individual, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it is it's a gray area on both sides, you know.
I agree. It is a gray area on both sides. And, I always fall back to most of the revolutionaries,
Mhm.
we're all fallible people. I
Right,
mean, we're all fallible people, I mean, not everybody had, white sheets that they could go to sleep on every night. Like somebody always did something, or I don't know,
right.
something like, but what was the greater picture? What was the greater message that they were trying to convey? I think that's what we need to focus on, because if we don't,
That's it.
then that's where the other side starts winning, right?
Right. We look at the person, you
Right,
know, and the past of what he or she have done.
right,
And I say, like you mentioned, you got to look at the greater picture of what's taking place, you know.
right,
Because when
right.
you think of Kwanzaa, for sure, Kwanzaa is the celebration of our ancestors, you know, for the African American community, where there is no celebration that I can think of in which we have. And this is the main purpose for that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah. All right. So at that time, though, I looked at Ron Karinga as a sellout who had worked with the FBI to assassinate one of the greatest leaders, Bunchy Carter. I admired John Huggins too. I was impressed by the fact that Bunchy Carter had been a leader of the Slauson Street gang in Los Angeles and had brought with him all in under the leadership of the Black Panther Party. He subsequently formed the Southern California chapter of the Black Panther Party and became the leader of that chapter. Anyone who could transform an entire street gang into a revolutionary chapter of the BBP, I figured was a genius. I never heard any speeches of Bunchy Carter, but Elaine Brown spoke about how much the brothers and sisters looked up to Bunchy. The way she spoke about him in her book made me develop a great admiration for him too. I viewed him as the Fred Hampton type of leader who had been murdered prematurely as well. After giving it some thought, I got back to Fatty L and told him I would participate in the upcoming Kwanzaa cultural event. My reasoning for doing so was simple. I knew a lot of the conscious order brothers that attended Kwanzaa, and they were the ones I was intending to recruit anyway. I didn't want to allow something that transpired over 30 years ago to become an obstacle for the recruiting brothers today. Besides, I liked much of the message of Kwanzaa. I wasn't a cultural naturalist myself, but I liked the message of unity, self-determination, collective economics, and some of the other principles that it gave voice to. I wasn't a fan of the metaphysical, quasi-religious message you would also get from attending Kwanzaa, but that wasn't something that would stop me from attending. I even got my homeboy Lee to jump on board with me in attending. From the beginning of December until our Kwanzaa program, Leah and I would go over to the school and practice with other brothers a few times out of the week. They gave us another reason to be out of our cell during the evening for about an hour or two, which wasn't something we were going to complain about. I was given the task to give a speech in regards to the first principle of Kwanzaa, Umoja. Umoja stood for unity. I picked that principle myself because I felt that what we were lacking most was unity and solidarity amongst our own people. I wanted to speak to that. I believe that all the 6 other principles were meaningless if we didn't have unity.
Mhm.
Interesting, interesting. Some days I would go over to the school and practice my written speech in front of a room full of brothers while listening to theirs. Other days I worked on Harriet Tubman's play and was asked to participate in it. I never thought I would play Harriet Tubman. I never thought I would play Harriet Tubman in my life, but that's who I was in that play. Since we were in prison with all men, there were no women to play Harriet. I would have been offended if I were asked to play her under any other circumstance. Not because I thought it would be disrespectful to play someone I had always admired, but I would have thought it would be disrespectful to play Harriet Tubman's legacy for a man to play her. Interesting. I
Mm.
knew that many white people viewed her as having manly features and wasn't considered pretty according to European standards of beauty. I wouldn't have allowed myself to play the caricature of her in order for white supremacists to get their laughs in. However, due to the circumstances, I recognized that this play wasn't one of those situations, so I accepted the position with honor. That is very interesting. Wow, that is extremely interesting because, of course, they were all men. And so he
Right.
accepted the position with honor. There's a movie that was made, and I think it's called Harriet, just a few years ago. I have yet to see that movie. But what angered me about that movie is when they were writing the script and getting the funds to create it and all that, I heard that they wanted Julia Roberts to play the lead role. So
Yeah.
Hollywood execs had no idea who this person was.
Oh
And
my
I was
God.
like, Julia, like she's white as hell. Like, what? Did y'all ever hear about that? I was like, you gotta be kidding me.
And not only that, but in regarding to Harriet movie, the actress, what's her name, Cynthia Erivo,
Something like
she
that, yeah.
played Harriet, and a lot of African Americans was really upset behind that because of the fact she's from England and that
Oh,
African American, and they feel as far as this prestigious role in which we know of this incredible commander, it should be played by African American. But of course, our origin, we come from Africa, so I wasn't bothered by it. But if y'all know the history of this incredible woman, it is amazing. I mean, it's amazing. Even when she was in her 80s, I think it's late 80s or 90s, when she tried to get some compensation from the military to sustain her, and she was denied that right. You know what this elderly woman did? I wouldn't say elderly, but this commander did. She went out and started sowing seeds that would grow apples, where she would eat that, sustain her. And I want to add this because this is historical, is that when the National Council of Negro Women heard about what she was doing, they came together and made sure that they sustained her into her last days. They made sure she had some kind of compensation. And I'm like, you know what? The military owes the estate of Harriet Tubman some money because she was involved in the military, in the army, where she has swapped decks, but they had seen her as I wouldn't say contraband, but they seen her as cargo, you could say, where she wasn't known for being a soldier, but someone who was in the military, which they found ways not to compensate this woman for her duties in her time in the service. But I would recommend read her story. There is so much tied up in there with that white short she wore. Um, Even Queen Elizabeth, though, that's a whole nother ball game.
Mm-hmm.
But she had sent Harriet Tubman that shawl that she wore to show appreciation of what she have done by freeing a lot of people. And don't you know, ship was named after Harriet Tubman,
Oh, interesting.
the only female, the only ship that was named after a female and an African American female, called the Harriet Tubman Freedom Ship.
Wow, that's cool. That's cool.
Mhm. Yeah,
She
yeah.
definitely has a remarkable story. Now I got to go see that movie. You know, in the comments, Rafa, he has a good point. In Judas and the Black Messiah, the main character was also from England, and I
Mhm.
guess that Miss Tubman was also a spy for the Union Army.
Oh yes,
Um, I mean
yeah,
that
she was.
she led like many lives all in one.
Right. She was a person who navigated her way there. She was a commander. She was a herbalist. She was one who, a person who meditated. She has been gifted with so many roles that she did not allow even her illness to really defeat what her mission is. Because she was having seizure after she something heavy, I forgot what it was, an object that was thrown to her that was meant to be thrown at another person, and it struck her, but she started having seizures after that. But it's so
Mhm.
much that this incredible woman had went through, and I'm gonna tell you what helped saved her. And you're looking at it, her hair, because when she ran away, her hair was mistaken for bushes. And it was hard for, the slave catchers or the police back then to catch her because her hair looked like a bush.
Interesting. Interesting.
Hmm. Yeah,
Interesting.
it's
Man,
a
what a
lot.
remarkable woman, man, to live all through that. And if I'm not mistaken, she died and was buried like amongst like really famous silent film actors of the day or something like that, if I'm not mistaken. I remember
Mhm.
seeing a picture of a horse-drawn carriage, and like you could see everybody in
Yeah,
their very nice three-piece suits and stuff, and like
yeah, it was
all
a
the
mass
prominent
funeral.
black actors of the time, they put up like a very nice funeral for her. I remember thinking, wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, it was a whole lot of people that came to her funeral. And matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken, and quote me on this, going back to the National Council of Negro Women, what they have done is invested in the construction of her ship.
Oh
They
wow.
had, during that time, during the Depression, they had invested in stocks and bonds that was over millions and millions and millions of dollars. These Black women, prominent Black women in that group, where they see that a business, they consider themselves as being having sisters who's part of a business within a business to help build whatever project they have, and invested in the construction and reconstruction of that ship to get it, mission commission, and that's not commission, but going. And I think that a ship was lasted for 5 or 7 years. It's been a long time. I gotta revisit it, but it's a whole lot of history, rich history that they not teaching in school, which our children need to know more about Harriet Tubman. And
Yeah.
it's different, which I'm gonna say, as far as Brother Kwame to take this road, because now if you look at Hollywood, they just I see they degrade, masculinity, especially brown and Black men, and having them to look like bona fide idiots and playing some of these female roles. And they show it in a matter where it could be a good laugh, instead of something that's important that reflect on history and something that we can be proud of. And they see that it's more, bringing more revenue and more people to laugh at something of seeing a man in a dress trying to be feminine as a male role, or trying to be in another role that is non-traditional or very different, than to show the beauty of that character, in which we just looking at the person in a costume instead of viewing the person who plays in that role.
I see what you're saying, because like with me just recently, I just saw Apocalypto, and that's been out for years now. That's that Mel Gibson movie about, ancient Aztecs and Mayans and so forth. And doing the research, two-spirit people have always been around. And the thing about certain tribes, especially Southern Amazonian tribes, is the women were the ones that were the leaders and the soldiers. And it was the men
All
that
right.
stood at home. And obviously it didn't depict that at all. And then, it
Mhm.
depicted more the inner struggle between the two tribes and beheading people and all that. And I was like, yeah, that took place, but like, it didn't really show the intricacies of the family unit, the way they govern themselves. No, it was
Right.
basically this guy trying to survive being hunted by another tribe. Like that was the whole movie, legit. And at the end, they saw the
Uh-huh.
Spaniards coming as colonizers, and I was like, this is trash. Like I
Uh-huh.
wasted 2 hours of my life watching trash. I wanted to see more of the historical dialogue, but that's not what Hollywood wants. That's not what
Right.
pays the bill.
Right.
So
But you know what, brother? To say briefly, do you know where the spirits of the Panthers came from? They came from this awesome African tribe of women known as the Dahomey Warriors. And if you look at the Black Panther movie, um, with Viola, in a movie by Viola Davis, that gives you, insight about this tribe of women who defeated some people in several campaigns, and have really trained like Spartans. And that fear was suspected and unexpected, and they still are in existence. I think I posted recently on my Facebook about this warrior group where people think that they had died in the past. No, they still are alive, and they went through a tremendous type of ritual, but very harsh type of training, to conquer whatever that they will face. So, yeah, I'd like to go ahead and brief that, post that as well, but it is a whole lot that we need to look into, where the schools are not teaching it. And Hollywood is presented a point, but they're also making a spectacle out of it too, and they're telling the whole truth about it.
yeah, I remember Napoleon saying something to the effect that the victor will always write history to whatever it is that they want, because obviously they're the victors, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so it's interesting because the more that I research history, there hasn't really been anything new. So I don't understand why certain things are struggled with. For example, and Veronica can talk to you about this, especially for us as Chicanos and being with the Southwest and stuff. At times we can be a little bit machoistic or anti-trans or whatever. But then, I read about the Cristero War in the Mexican Revolution, where some of the Christians were fighting against like some different political regimes. And little girls were like, oh, I can't serve. Okay, well, I'm going to dress up as a boy. And they would serve, and
Mhm.
they were like highly decorated. When I look at um when I go even further back, when I look at some of the tribal people like the Purepecha, the Tarahumara, some of the
Mhm.
women were the ones that were the chiefs or the chieftains, and they commanded the whole village. It wasn't some dude that was smoking a peace pipe, right? But like that's what Hollywood makes you think, right?
Right.
So like it's interesting how it seems like we have always had our, trans and two-spirit comrades and same-sex comrades and then other political or revolutionary figures that had always been there, but then, Hollywood will portray them as something else, or it's almost like we forgot. Like, why are
Mm,
we forgetting that history? And I always go back to what Napoleon said, that the victor will always be the one that's going to rewrite history and be in charge of the historical books. And it's true.
absolutely.
Ever since the beginning of time, if you raided another war party or another nation, the first thing you did was erase all the historical texts and you instituted your own. There was a famous book in the 60s called Fahrenheit 450 where it talked about political books being burned at that Fahrenheit degree. And the whole
Mhm.
movie, it was a weird English British movie. The whole movie was the government going about and burning all radical and political books. Well, now look what's happening in Florida. Now they are literally through CRT, now they're banning different books that may be 100% right and historically accurate, but they don't want that. They don't want that
Mm,
taught in their schools. It's very interesting.
wow.
Yeah, very interesting. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and continue. We're on page 193. The day of Kwanzaa, I was a little nervous. I had never given a speech in front of an auditorium full of people before. I had practiced my speech so many times that I practically could give it off the cuff. Reading from my written speech just gave me the confidence that I needed to capture the exact message I wanted to convey. I remember when it was my turn to give my speech. I walked to the podium with long, confident strides. When I reached the podium, I sat my paper down and looked at the crowd. The first words poured out of my mouth in a roar. By the time I had finished my speech, a number of brothers in the crowd were standing and clapping hysterically. I walked back to my seat feeling relieved. That was the first time I had given a written speech. I told myself after that one I would try to give any future ones off the cuff. There were a number of performances that really got the crowd hyped up. A number of brothers did old raps, spoken word, songs, and gave speeches themselves. The whole time I sat in the audience watching the various performances, I was really swept up in the spirit of the occasion. I was glad that I had participated. When it was my turn to go to the stage for the Harriet Tubman portion, I was ready. I've always been a sort of comedian at times. To make the crowd laugh when we were acting like we had just escaped with some slaves from a plantation, I unexpectedly stopped, dropped, and rode up and sat up in a squat. The crowd broke out in laughter around the whole room. I followed that up with telling the runaway slaves that I didn't see anybody and we had to keep moving. Yeah. All right. So we're on the top of page 194. Ain't nobody's coming. I said in a slave form of speech, we gotta keep up moving yonder. They's trying to catch us in these woods. That northern star points yonder for us to keep going that way. I stopped, dropped, and rode again. All the other slaves followed me in the same move. By this time, the crowd was laughing uncontrollably. It it wasn't that I was making a mockery of what our ancestors had endured. I just knew how much more comical incidents could capture the crowd's attention and bring them into the storyline, so that they could actually learn something. Theatrics was all part of the bigger picture. People who found me to be down to earth and relatable were more likely to be willing to listen to the audience of your message and follow you. I had accomplished what I had wanted to achieve by participating in the Kwanzaa event. Several brothers came up to me afterwards and wanted to know how we could work on future programs together. I viewed these new acquaintances as opportunities to recruit some of these into the Black Gorilla Circle. So he was right. I mean, doing his old Kwanzaa event, he was able to recruit more people. Very interesting. It's kind of a
Mhm.
cool tactic if you think about it. A few days after Kwanzaa, the counselor in Cecil House came to my cell and informed me that she was putting me in a facility transfer since my level had dropped. I was stunned by the news. After spending nearly 5 years on some form of segregation status due to me being a security threat to the facility, I thought that was crazy. After being
Wow.
in general population for only 3 months, they were telling me that I was now a role model prisoner. I insisted with the counselor to reconsider transferring me out of the facility. I told her that I felt they were setting me up for failure by moving me to a lower level security prison. She said there was nothing she could do because I had dropped in my security level She had no choice but to put me in for a facility transfer. I was devastated. A few days after being informed of that, they moved me to the west side of Cecil House and placed me in a cell near the front of the range. I wanted to stay at Michigan City for a number of reasons. Yes, the threat of violence was more imminent there. Fights and stabbings would occur more often than they had at Wabash. But because there was a lot more stuff going on there, it was a lot easier to stay under the radar and do my time. The fact that Michigan City had a larger population of prisoners and there was always someone that deemed a greater threat to the security of the facility than you, most of the guards would overlook you. It was easier to blend into the background and stay out of the way. I liked it like that. I just wanted to serve out the rest of my time, acquire a few vocational trades, and develop the Black Guerrilla Circle on the low. I could do all that in Michigan City without having as many confrontations with the guards. I felt that I felt that was in the best interest for the prison and myself. The goal was to get out one day and be able to take what I had learned and built to the streets. What's interesting is it almost seems like they were punishing him, like, yeah, he dropped in his level, and so they're going to transfer him. But that prison had so many like options available, he didn't want to go. So then it's like,
Right,
well, what do? Do you act up and keep your level up? Or do you quote unquote be
right,
the model prisoner and then get transferred out and lose the things that you like?
right,
Again, there's no reformation in these prison systems. God, it's so terrible. They just need to be
right.
abolished. The problem with being transferred to a lower level facility was that I still had over 10 years of left in prison. The lower level prisons were known for their open dormitory settings. I had spent the past 5 years, mainly in the cell by myself. Even in general population in Michigan City, we had our own cells. That fact alone kept conflicts down and made doing time a lot easier. Oh, I see. So he's going to be exposed to other people. That's interesting. There's nothing like having your own space when you didn't have to smell someone else's shit whenever they detected or defected or dealt with their mood swings, whenever the time started to get to them. I had gotten accustomed to that. I didn't like the idea of losing my individual space or trading it with a communal environment in a cell house. I could have space to think in a cell house. I could have space to think, to read, to write, and to be alone if I wanted it without feeling like my space was constantly being violated by noise, the interference of others, and being confronted with the problems of others involuntarily. Besides, in my own cell, the doors would be locked, and if it wasn't, I could place a latch over my cell door and sleep peacefully, knowing that I couldn't be ambushed by someone unexpectedly. Hmm. In an open communal environment, I didn't have that same safety and security. If someone was having a bad day and wanted to take it out on me while I slept, they could easily beat me in the head with a lock and a sock, broom, or whatnot. Knowing how much more vulnerable I would be still didn't sit well with me. I tried not to let it worry me, but I knew that prison was setting me up for failure. Wow. Again, you can sense the trauma in this guy's voice, like even the way he sleeps and having locks. Jeez. As
Yeah.
I
And
waited
also,
my Go ahead, sister.
oh, oh, no, I just want to say, as far as this point is concerned, it just show you the condition, the harsh condition that's there, where, we mentioned about the health of people, where it's no different from slavery. The health, is something that wasn't a big thing because they living in a small, confined um, unit. And if you think about the pandemic, that's happening, it have taken the lives of many people and also put people on lockdown. So it's like, those who are detained, they are not getting adequate care and to maintain their health, because health is not an issue in a prison system as well as in slavery, else, they will be the prison system will be very conscious about those who need maintenance medicines to sustain their life, instead of waiting a month or just having a number of people to rally and protest against those who are being medically neglected or vulnerable by living in that small prison cell with someone who has a contagious illness like COVID-19, you
Yeah,
know.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you're
Yeah.
totally right. You actually just reminded me of a conversation that I had not too long ago, actually. If you remember when the different vaccines were coming out, Pfizer and so forth, when Johnson
Mhm.
and Johnson came out, that was a single dose. And I remember people literally, think about this, literally community leaders having a meeting about, hey, there's a single dose. Do we use it for the corrections health population? Like they weren't even going to
Right.
give them a choice, but they thought, well, with corrections health, just like with the houseless comrades, we
Mhm.
don't have to track them for the second or third doses. We could just inoculate and go. And like there were
Right.
meetings about this, like, should we do it or not? Not let's do it and let them have the option if they want to have it or not. Like they were literally having meetings on should they do it. And I'm telling you, these meetings lasted months, well into the
Right.
pandemic. And I remember
Mhm.
thinking, man, you know, corrections health inmates, they are the last to get anything. They always get shitted on. And the more
Of
that I
course.
got into this book, on top of that, it almost seems like they're more exposed to more and more trauma, the way they're being treated by the guards, not having safety mechanisms and being able to sleep peacefully at night. Whereas you and I can lock our doors or whatever. Like they already are in a cell. Why not give everybody a
Absolutely.
latch? Like, where are they going to go? Right. Um,
Mhm.
and I think you're right, sister. I think it's almost designed like that to break the human dignity, to break that spirit, and just like they're just like cattle. Like they're almost seen
Right.
as not even human. You know, it's disgusting to think about.
And also we can't be we'd be remiss by even mentioning about what's going on with immigration, where these children and these men and women are separated. And there's one book, um, if I'm not mistaken, called God knows I forgot the escape. And I cannot believe I can believe it, that these men from overseas, from India, Africa, and Mexico, all was sent uh, to the Midwest after Hurricane Katrina to clean up that area. And they was actually imprisoned in these infirmary camps and treated slaves, like slaves. They were slaves. And the harsh condition that they faced was no different from the slaves who were freed and was sent to Mississippi, the Devil Bowl, where they had to work until they died, and they was faced with a whole lot of harsh conditions. And it's amazing where people think that slavery had ended, and it has not. The brutality of a man um, breaking out other men, humankind, is horrendous and is still in existence. Even, with the immigration system, where now you're not going to hear no news about still children being separated, still people being incarcerated for what? To seek freedom. And then again, we got to look at what is freedom. But then,
Mm.
you got these politicians even using those individuals who come to the state illegally and just dropping them off, instead of just helping people to either get the green cards or go through the process to become citizens, and it's horrible. But it's so funny because, my friend, who she's Black, live here in the States, she said to hell with it one day, got on a plane, and now she's living in Mexico, and she loving it. She been here for 6 months. She's loving it. That's where I'm headed, just to see her. But she's loving the place.
Good for her.
I
Good for
bet
her.
she
Sister
is.
Veronica,
Yeah.
you had your hand up, sister. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, brother. I just wanted to follow up with just some information that kind of ties into what we're speaking of. Um, I've done a lot of reading on the New African Prisoners Organization, and one of the things um, that ties into this very nicely is, I mean, first off, they're looking at the 13th Amendment, which we, discussed is really not didn't abolish slavery, it just
Mhm.
repackaged it, right? But the second point being that the word genocide, and when the Article 2 of the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, which the definition that was adopted for the word genocide by the United Nations General Assembly, it reads as follows. It says, and this was in 1948, mind you, and this is just in part, this is not the whole definition, states in part that genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as follows. A, killing members of the group, which would be the most obvious, right? But for many people, if you ask them to define genocide, that's the end of the definition. It's the killing, and usually a large group of people. But it goes on to say, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of a group. Causing serious bodily or mental harm. So you need not kill the people. You need just have the intent, okay, to cause bodily or mental harm to a member of a specific group. C, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. Now, if C does not speak to what we're talking about here within the prison system, I don't know what does. They are purposely, this is not maybe by design, it is absolutely by design that they are living the way that they are living. It's no accident, but it is a deliberate inflicting on the conditions of life. And so everything that you all are speaking to here, it speaks to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. When we talk about, breaking down the psyche of a person, dehumanizing people, that speaks to that particular part of that. And it should make us all aware that the conditions of life are not just the consequences, like it says here, of a few bad men in office, or the results of inequality, or the culture of poverty. It says genocide is a conscious, systematic policy practiced upon a specific group of people, particularly Black and Brown Indigenous people, by those powers that be, and it is carried out on all levels by both public and private political, economic, and socio-cultural institutions.
Right. And also, we also have to look at that as being the same type of brutality, evenness that's happening in the foster care system, also in medicine, where there are some people who don't believe that racism exists in medicine, and it does. And where Black women has always been the lab rats, and
higher mortality rates.
Right, have high mortality rates, and the ones who are very vulnerable, where we don't have any pain. And I remember where I was tortured, you can say, as a little girl, where I had to get my nail bed cut all the way down to the nip, and they did that without any freaking anesthesia. Let me put my video on. I'm sorry, y'all. Any anesthesia. And it's like Black women voice are not being heard, where you go into the hospital, for example, for a GYN area, and you find that you leaving the hospital without your uterus. You know, And yet, there's some people that say that, oh yeah, we got to put a rubber statue of the founding father, which is Dr. Sims, and he's the one that, gun ho and putting one of the black slaves on the table and butchering her up and taking her organs and cutting that up, which is still evidence today. Where even with one of, a black lady by the name of Loggett, where, still her cells are being used and abused and used, which her family is not being compensated at all for what she historically have done to help, the field of medicine and science, and change the trajectory of that with new medicines and other innovating things that's happening. Even with these four, I forgot the name of these two sets of twins, where they was misused and abused in the area of, as far as clinical psychology and psychiatry, and they have not received any money towards their estate. I mean, it's a whole lot that we got to look to and into, which Brother Kwame have wonderfully have presented all these topics that relate to the real conditions that happening to the brown and black community and people of color who are oppressed and poor.
And actually,
Savannah.
sister, the fourth part of that definition of genocide goes to what you're speaking to, which is the imposing measures intended to prevent births within a group. So the forced sterilization, you spoke about the ICE concentration camps, and so many of these sisters are going in and thinking they're getting some sort of exam of some sort and coming out not being able to have babies anymore.
Right, definitely. And then we have to look at what you call the HIPAA law, where we supposed to be informed of our rights, as Brother Lobo and I know, working in healthcare. And I'm like, how can we advocate something that we have the right as a client, but then again, with what's taking place with the COVID-19, where we are forced to either roll up or roll out.
That's right. It was the same thing for me, sister. Same thing for me, because I work in a mental health clinic. Yeah. But I know particularly for people in mental health, the whole idea of, or in the medical field, is that, oh, you're around people, you're gonna be around people that are sick, you pass it on to the sickly, that whole thing was that, I know, like, for example, where I work, they did it to where, they weren't even doing what was the mandate. They were doing more than what was the mandate.
Yeah.
It was way over even what the mandate was, which we know that the mandate doesn't mean that you had to have it, but the word itself made people think so.
Absolutely.
And so they put in even, if it was, they made it to where you couldn't say no, because you will not keep your job. But they know how to do those legal, they do it within that gray area where you cannot sue them for violating your civil rights by making you pay for the test. And we'll only take these certain tests. And that is going to come out of your pocket.
And you know what? And you're right, sister. That's why the doctors were responsible to actually give out these shots, but your pharmacists and outside lab work, or or the National Guard, because I know I was forced to actually take the the shot at the time clock. They waited until I clock in and they say, here's your choice: roll up or roll out. Yeah.
Right.
So we got a question, or we need to reform what the heck the HIPAA means. What does it mean? Since we don't have a right, but they find that those who, didn't get a shot is highly vulnerable. I can't scientifically say that, but I'm going to tell you one thing for a reality. I worked on a COVID floor for 2 years and never had the doggone thing.
Mm.
And
Now,
I've had it
explain
3
that.
times since getting the shot. 3
So you
times
had
I've
the
gotten it, and
breakthrough.
every single, I ended up at every single time COVID. This last time, the 3rd time, COVID, flu, and pneumonia.
Oh
Eh,
man.
God
Yeah, and caught it
almighty.
at the hospital.
But you know what? When I got it, it was not even at the facilities in the hospital where I have worked at. Matter of fact, I got it when, this company had came over to do the HVAC, the
Oh, the
system,
HVAC.
yeah, the
Mm-hmm.
AVAC, and I busted them not having a mask, and I complained about that to my rental manager, and I told them, look, I'm about to call the cops because they had endangered my life. It was a big nasty thing, and believe you me, we was at his war, and they say they have to come in and fix it. And to make a long story short, shortly after, I ended up with COVID, where it almost took my life, and I had to get a transfusion.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Now, you
So
know what's interesting is if I could, and I'll be open to any form of criticism to Sister Anna and Sister Vero, because in my opinion, Black, brown, and Indigenous women are the center of the universe, right? So check this out, just to play devil's advocate. I remember um, before they made a mandate that people in healthcare had to have the vaccine, it was still kind of new. And if you remember, when the vaccine was coming out, who was first getting it? Like NBA stars and actors,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like it wasn't
absolutely.
regularly available
Right.
to us. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember having a real candid conversation with a member from AIM, an elder from AIM. He's now since passed away, but I remember I was like, man, I don't know about this. Like I'm kind of freaked out. And of course, I know my history. I know what, the U.S. Cavalry did in terms of smallpox
Mm-hmm.
and blankets to the native populations. And you know what he told me?
Right.
He said, who's getting it first? And I was like, well, I forgot the name of the player now. Somebody
Yeah,
I seen
yeah.
on Twitter, somebody famous, actors, politicians. And you know what he told me?
Mm-hmm.
He goes, get it. He said, if it wasn't something that was meant for the masses, the 99, the elites would not be getting it. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh. And he said, and
Oh my
think
goodness.
about it. This is an elder, and he goes, the cavalry, when they
Mm.
gave us the blankets, they didn't take any home for them. And I was
Mm.
like, damn. Now, in my opinion, I think I should have gone with one over another because I myself did
Okay.
suffer from complications. But I'll never forget it rang true. I was like, damn, that's right. Senators were getting it, actors. And then months and months later, after how many
The
people
general
died?
population.
Right. Was it
Yeah.
ready for the
The
general
general
Yeah.
population?
population.
But
Oh,
here's
Right.
another twist to that, brother. Here's
Oh, yeah.
another twist to that.
Let's see.
I don't fall for that one because I feel like, okay,
it's propaganda.
that's a ploy to get us to feel like it's safe. Oh, they getting it. We want it. We want it.
Absolutely.
Mm,
Yeah.
No. Yeah,
It's
y'all ain't getting the
propaganda.
same thing. We're not getting the same thing. And don't tell me that the prisoners are getting the same thing.
Right.
It ain't
Because
no
you
way.
gotta look, you gotta
I
look
can see
at
that.
you got to look at what they getting
Mm-hmm.
and how they are being maintained, where the rich will get a different version and outcome and the option opposing to someone who's on Medicare, Medicaid, or
Right.
who don't have no insurance. But I
Right.
just want to, I also want to say, before I forget, is that, if I have only limited supplies because it's to each and every household, but if y'all need a test, please apply for it. I think it's still free, that the government is paying for it. If not, I got a couple of supplies for the test to just determine if you have it. because knowledge is important, and it's important that you know that you have it or you don't have it. Because there's some people who could be asymptomatic, and there's some people who could have been in a very serious situation where I had to call 911 on myself and sit in my car and for them to come while my world was spinning around forwards and backwards, And if it wasn't, and I have to mention, if it wasn't for my daughter dropping off this one thing, I think I would have seen the lights and say bye-bye to everyone. And you know what really saved me? Because I couldn't digest or even have the energy to get up. Seeded grapes. It was grapes. It was grapes that practically saved my life.
Wow, sister,
So I
and we are
just want
so
to say
glad that
that.
you are here, and we are so glad that you are still here with us.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I remember
100%.
last year.
Just real quick, I want to see what everybody's opinion is on this. I think I last heard that they were going to call the pandemic done, what, in May or something like that, just a few months from now, when there are still people getting infected and all that. And I'm a
Oh, yeah.
firm believer, what do y'all think, that it's because of capitalism. They need the workers. So of course
Oh,
they're gonna call it done, right? Of course they're gonna say, no, 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 there's no more yet. My neighbor just got it.
well,
They need
brother,
that capitalistic machine to keep going.
let me just say this. I noticed this up around the time of Obama being in administration. This was a 8-year spans, but it's like every 4 years, there's always an epidemic or a pandemic, okay? And it comes down to population control. And it also deals with genocide.
Yes.
And if we are not in war, put it this way, if we are not taken away from the illnesses, guess what proceeds? War. So there's a certain amount, and right now we overpopulated, and it's not a whole lot of products that's out there that's supplying us, but of course you see a whole lot of number of people that's in the world, and of course there's, like I say, is a growing number of people who are homeless, and there are people who say the hell with it and become houseless and living in tents. And believe you me, people have this misconception that you have to have no money to be houseless. But don't you know there are nurses, people in the healthcare that's living houseless and living among the homeless? And they're not sick. I'm not sick. I'm sorry. Let me take that away. They're not mentally free, I'll call them. No, but they are actually faced with that.
Yeah. And even the notion of being, with population control, to say that we are overpopulated. I just read this somewhere. I want to say it was in one of the journals as well, because that's just kind of been my go-to. But where it was a message to African American women for positive and productive change, and it talks in there about this notion of population control and being overpopulated, and it says, say that to China. and you know what I mean? That just ain't gonna fly. Really, what that means is there's too many Black and brown people, because even when you look at like COVID, who are the people that are disproportionately dying? It's us.
Black and brown. It's Black and brown. And you know what is so crazy is that if you have a chance, and I have told so many people this ever since 2020, have a chance to Google Event 201, because everything was premeditated, assimilated. Everything was assimilated back in 2019. No, take that back, 2018. And it all had been sponsored by Bill Gates and Melinda Gates institutions.
No surprise.
So,
right.
Yeah. So that tells you a lot.
Surprised at all. Not surprised by me. Comrade Zombie, you had your hand up. Go ahead, comrade, and welcome.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hey, Anna. Hey, Veronica. How are you?
Hi. I was thinking about you.
I was just going to answer.
Stuff.
Oh, what was that? I'm sorry, honey.
I said, I was thinking about you earlier because I didn't realize that you were on, that you would really bring some good stuff to this
Yeah, we
Well,
don't
thank
come
you.
in
conversation.
street.
No, I was just going to answer Lobo's question because let me tell you what, we were pissed off because they started out with this 10-day, 10-day quarantine. If you even got exposed, you can't come to work. And
Mm,
then when everybody
yes.
started going, oh, I was exposed. Oh, I was exposed. I was
right,
exposed.
right.
They had like 2 people in the entire
Right.
building. It was like, oh, no. We meant 5 days.
Right.
We meant 5. Did we say 10? Because we meant 5, And then all of a sudden, it's like, oh, if you've been exposed, but you're not having any symptoms, you can come to work.
Mm,
And we're like, wait a minute.
how does that make
Hold on.
sense?
Yeah. So it was totally capitalism, Lobo. Totally capitalism.
100%,
Veronica,
100%.
you were spot on with what you said. This whole thing, this whole Roe versus Wade thing, and the whole thing about abortion is because the
Mhm.
majority of people who get abortions are white women, and they want more white babies born. So you are dead
Absolutely.
on. Please.
Yes,
Right.
you
Please.
hit it, sister.
But it's fact. I mean,
It
it is fact,
And meanwhile, Black and brown women will die trying to
right,
make a
Mhm.
choice for themselves,
right,
Right.
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 Mm,
So I mean, you hit that damn nail. They're sitting there, they are sitting there and they're going, oh, come on, man, we're getting too many Black and brown babies. We got to get some more
mhm,
white babies in this mix here. And that is
That's
the
it.
only reason why it even came up,
mhm.
Yeah.
so dead 100% correct, sister.
Yeah, because
100.
you got, yes, sis, because you have to ask yourself, when is the last time you heard about, or
Come here.
seen a white baby being born in comparisons to Black and brown babies, and
Mhm.
also marriage? People are really slowing down on getting married,
Mhm.
and white women are getting married at an older age. Well,
Mhm.
everybody, but the number of, when you look at race, a lot of white women are getting married at an older age than at 18, then or 20 or 21 or 25.
Well,
Mhm.
what our government is running into is that their own greed and
Mhm.
greed of the capitalist system is coming back to bite them in the ass because
Yes.
people can't afford to get married. They can't afford to have children,
Yeah.
and
Because of
now
student loan.
now they're in this.
Capitalism will destroy itself. Mhm.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is. It is. It is quickly destroying itself. Not quickly enough. I'd like to see it happen a little
Uh,
faster, actually. But
Right.
yeah.
but
Yeah.
it
We
is
get
destroying
the right
itself.
people in office, and it'll happen faster.
Right. And they are now reaping what they have sown for all
Mhm.
of these years.
Right.
And they're in an
Absolutely.
absolute panic. Oh my God, these people aren't getting married, they're not having kids. Holy shit, what
Right.
are we gonna do? I know,
Right.
let's ban abortion and force all these white women to have children.
Uh-huh.
you know.
And
So
it's true, but yet everybody want us to work. And you got to
right.
say, have I been born to pay bills and die? You know what
Mm,
I'm
mm,
saying? We
Yeah.
being forced. And, people, there are going to be so many people who are going to be indebted from student loans or any other financial
Yeah.
obligation where they will not be able to get off
Yeah.
the couch in the living room, or always
Right.
have to stay in their,
Right.
parents' home. Yeah, and that will be taken is
Well,
because of what's happening and what we are obligated
right.
now.
Well, and it's all of it. I mean, it's not just, you can't look at just people who look at just one thing don't see how it all ties in together.
right.
And you know, God, I hate white people. What
Um,
White
The
people
whi-
are especially
That
white
we
people are especially bad at this. That we are. We are bad at this because we don't see that the abortion thing is about wanting to have more white babies. We don't see that you know, if you lock up enough black and brown men and they can't have babies, then
Mhm.
that's going to
Mhm.
drop that population while our population is getting bigger, and we're going to be in charge again. You know, we're
That's
going to
it.
be set in our position, and
Right.
people
Mhm.
need to
It's
open their
war.
eyes and see that, and
It's war.
they won't, they don't, you know,
Right.
they
Yeah,
It's
don't.
the same.
it takes a lot. It takes a lot for a person to step outside
Yeah.
of their comfort and their privilege to
Yeah.
see these things, you know. And it's like if you're not directly affected by it some way, somehow, then it's
Right.
really hard, you know. But I also don't want to negate that there are, you know, we just don't have enough allies, you know.
Right.
but
Right.
but we do
Well, and
have
I
them.
don't ever, I mean, I don't ever excuse that kind of behavior. And I
Mm.
would never excuse the obstinance of the white man to not realize the position that he's in and the privilege that that he has.
Mhm.
I argue with him all the time. And I'm like, dude, seriously, you
Mhm.
don't, you, and I'll tell other people, they'll go, why is it so goddamn difficult to get these white men to understand what's going on? And I said, because you have to understand. I said, I am not making excuses for them, but you have to understand that if they admit that there is white privilege, they
Mhm.
To do
then have
something.
to question every
It.
single thing about their lives.
That's
Mhm.
You
it.
know,
And
did
Welcome
white
to our world.
privilege help them get where they are?
Mhm.
And it is
absolutely.
too much. It is too much for their little brains to handle.
Mhm.
They cannot do
Absolutely.
it. They can't.
Absolutely. And
You know.
it's the same difference with this um campaign or whatever dealing with reparation. There ain't no way that's going to happen unless we
Yeah.
get rid of the classes. People are not going to get thousands and thousands and dollars per each person for X amount a year. We already are a broke system. How that person out in California, San Francisco, gonna get that? It's not gonna happen because of the fact we still have these classes. And until we get rid of these classes,
Yeah.
then we could talk about something where it won't matter
Yeah.
because we all will be equal
Yeah.
in pay, you
Yeah.
know, and gender.
But Sister Anna, it's gonna be ugly.
It
It is going to
is
be
going to be
ugly.
ugly.
And the ones that are going to make it the ugliest are the
Uh-huh.
white men. The white men. Because they are going to fight like hell to hold on to
Mhm.
everything they have.
But still
Especially the
pump
ones
a
in
lot of,
power.
and
Especially the
still
ones
pump
in
a lot
power.
of air up
Yes.
our asses
Yes.
as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Ooh. And then the white women that are like, well, you know, no, go away. I can't stand these white women that like they what's the word? They enable them, you know, they make excuses for them and enable them instead of calling them out and going, look, dude, you know, nobody
This is
said your
what
life
happened.
was easier because you
Right.
have privilege. We're just telling you it wasn't hard. Yeah, okay, maybe your family was poor. We're not saying your family wasn't poor. We're not saying you didn't grow up like dirt, but you didn't have it harder because of the color of your skin. That's
Yes.
what privilege is. That's what your
Yeah.
privilege is. And they can't see that. They're like, well, we were poor. We didn't have privilege. We were poor. You know,
Right.
oh, you are never
Try
going to
being
get
black and poor. Try being brown
Right.
and poor.
right.
And
Right.
this one thing that you pointed out, they talking about something in the past tense, and it's no way in comparison to what's happening in the
No.
current sense.
I know. And so many of them are just never going to get it. They're
Yeah.
never going to get it.
And here's where I get to give a shout out to Comrade Elder High Thurman. So he had put a post, I believe it was on his Facebook, where he said, "Do I see color?" And he
Oh,
said,
right.
"Yes, I
Oh,
see
Yes.
so many beautiful people color." And I was like,
Yes.
"Hell yeah, man! This old white
Yeah.
man, it really is revolutionary." The
Yeah.
second thing is when he and Brother Kwame were here at our book reading, it was done in a very leftist bookstore in what used to be a very prominently black neighborhood that's kind of now more hipsterish or whatever. And so he had all kinds of people showing up there at this bookstore. And it was refreshing to me, for me, when he said, you know, I hope the revolution comes, but the first part of the revolution has to be black liberation. And I was like, what? And you can see people like all these hipsters looking at each other like, what the hell? Some of the more revolutionary comrades, you know, they were like, yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
man, I was like, hi, Thurman, man, he is the epitome of somebody who truly is awakened to what it is to be unified in that class struggle. Like he first said, black liberation has to come first. And then when asked about seeing color, he acknowledged it and acknowledged each and every one of us individually in the spaces that we
Yeah.
hold. And like to me, that's super refreshing,
Yeah.
especially for an
Lobo,
older gentleman at his age. Super
yeah,
refreshing.
Lobo, have you heard that thing? I cannot remember where I can't remember if I saw it like on TikTok or I read it somewhere where somebody said, you know, they call the United States the melting pot of America. We don't need to be a melting pot because when you're a melting pot, everything kind of runs together and just becomes homogenous. It becomes the same thing. They said what we need to be is a salad.
Yes, I've seen that.
We need to
Yes.
be a salad
We
because
need
you
Yes.
got
to be
all
a
these
salad.
different ingredients in a
Mhm.
salad and they all work together and make something great.
And it
Yes.
looked
You know,
beautiful.
and I thought that was the coolest thing.
That
You
is
know?
cool.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah,
I
I
like
really
that.
like that. So we need to be a salad bowl. We ain't the melting pot anymore. We need to be the salad bowl,
You know,
Right.
I
Wow.
wasn't big on salads, but I like that idea because it
right?
keeps your own identity. I don't like melding.
Yeah,
So yeah,
yeah.
I'm down with that.
You know, I just thought that was the coolest thing. I hate it, hate it, hate it when people say they don't see color. I said, well, you know what? That's
Yeah.
just as
Then you
bad.
don't see me.
That's almost as bad because then you don't acknowledge
Mm-hmm.
the special the specialness and the uniqueness of each person's culture. You want
Mhm.
to erase that. That's just as bad as what they were doing in the past. You
Yeah,
can't don't erase it, embrace it and learn about it, you
yeah.
know?
Mhm.
And yeah, I hate that. I hate that.
There's even privilege in saying I don't see race or
Yeah,
anything
Right.
because
yeah, no,
only people
But
that
you don't
come
have
from
to.
us, right, right, right,
right.
right, or people that you know were born with silver spoons in their mouths or have that elitist kind of mindset or that very classist kind of mindset. They're usually the ones that say they don't see anything. Well, that's because you
I
never
know.
struggled.
I know.
Mhm.
I know.
And not
Yeah,
only have you never struggled, you've never been a black or brown person struggling. So let's, you know, to
right.
top that off, right?
Right, right. It's like, have you been outside of your gated community anytime in the last couple of months?
And not to just play golf either.
Right, right.
Wow.
All right, y'all. I'm gonna go ahead and continue on page 195, second paragraph down, and it says, as I waited my institutional transfer, I took the last few weeks at Michigan City to kick it as much as I could with Lee and Crazy. We were all either in a different cell house on opposite sides or in the same cell house. They had moved Lee to A cell house while Crazy remained on the east side, a C cell house. I saw them occasionally, but for the most part, I stayed to myself and kicked it with a few brothers I knew from my time at Wabash or one of the lookup units I had been lockup units I had been on before. I had gotten used to forming peer groups, and then those same peer groups had been broken up. That all came with doing time. Nothing stayed the same for long. Just when you yourself felt adjusted to an environment, you would find yourself being moved to another one. After a while, you just learn to get used to readjusting and accepting it and adapting. I thought that was one of the hardest things for me to adjust to because you realize that you don't have any control whatsoever over your life and the social environments you're forced into. You either adapt or you become extremely maladaptive. On the 28th birthday, January 2nd, 2007, Payday had invited me to his cell and offered me some moonshine he had bought. This was a few years before he had been stabbed to death at Michigan City. Ever
Mm.
since he had given me that knife at Wabash that I had used to stab Clark, we had ran back into each at ISP, he would often pull me into the cell with him and a few other guys and talk about that stabbing. I would listen to him retell the story with a smirk on my face as he laughed about it. Man, he would start off by saying, Day told me that he was about to stab on an Aryan and asked me for hawk, right? I gave this motherfucker a hawk and this nigga stabbed the shit out of this guard while we were down there at Wabash. You would have seen that shit. You should have seen that shit. I probably heard him retell that story to guys at least a handful of times because he had a lot of respect from the brothers from the joint. Anytime he told somebody who had heard about it, it made them look at me differently. If they didn't already have respect for me, a number of guys who had been at Wabash with me, they would do stuff like that. I didn't talk about it much myself. I wasn't one to live in the past and at least bring up stuff I did, but anytime anyone else spoke about my past, I would do the same thing. Listen with a smirk on my face. A lot of the time, it seemed like it was nice for them, even then, even if it was about me. It was either it was either their way to convey the fact that they respected me and wanted me to know it, or they were the type of guys who loved telling their war stories, no matter if it was their story or someone else's. 9 times out of 10, if they were the latter, they would always add some extra exciting shit to the story that didn't even happen at all. They would get us to those embellished parts of the story, and you would be thinking to yourself, now this motherfucker knows goddamn well that shit hadn't transpired like that. I would never contact those types. I would just let them in. I would just let them tell how they remembered it with a smirk on my face and just listen. Payday would embellish a story in a minute, but I knew he had a lot of respect for me, though. I had a good birthday because of him. I think that was the only birthday I celebrated in prison that I was offered so much hooch and liquor that I had a nice buzz the whole day. I don't think the moonshine was actually moonshine. If I'm not, if I'm not mistaken, he had bought a bottle of Everclear for $100. The first wig I took out of it took my breath completely away. I wouldn't say I was a big drinker, but I drank and smoked occasionally while I was in prison, most of the time in the cell by myself. The following morning, I was awakened by a guard standing at my cell bars. He told me I was being transferred to another prison. I asked him which one I was going to, but he wouldn't tell me. I wanted to know because I heard that Brains was at Newcastle Correctional Facility. If they were going to be transferring me there, I knew there was a good chance I wouldn't be in general population too much longer. When I got on the transport van, they told me I was going to Newcastle Correctional Facility, and all I could do was smile. So it looks like there was a blessing in disguise for this brother. And that's the end of
Mhm.
chapter 17. Man, to summarize for me, my experience out of that chapter is just trauma, trauma, trauma. There's no way they could reform these poor individuals that are stuck in there. They keep them like cattle. The guards are just
Right.
dicks to them the whole time. They segregate them. They force racial impressions upon each other. Like, how is that reformation? Like, I think Sister Anna and Comrade Elder Jorge Nieves were right in the last reading where they were talking about just abolishing them. Like, there's no way you can reform that. I think you have to
Mm-mm.
totally abolish and start from new. But that's just my opinion.
Because with the system, like I briefly touch on, um, it's run mainly by these private companies, and it's
Mm-hmm.
so much of a financial burden on the family, where not only you pay to put money on the books, but the money that's on the books, are they rightfully being given to or distributed to those detainees? And
Right.
some, from what we understand, is no, it's not, and it's even being stolen down to collecting the personal property of those who first go into the facility with loose change, and I mean dollar bills, and even down to the coins. Would they get that back, no matter how many time or years that they serve? And the question is it missing? And find out it is missing. But is a system where it's collecting a lot of our tax-paying money. It's a system that's sucking the life out of families to sustain the inmates or the detainees. And for the detainees, it's like they have nothing to actually sustain themselves. Where even with the little bit of money that they get, if they lucky to get that, is not enough to pay for pencils, pens, toilet paper, and the necessities where, you know, when it comes down to a shakedown, all of those property is destroyed, where those detainees are rights are taken away, where it's not just right, but human right, you know, where the fittest survive. And then you're out there and then you're vulnerable, you know. So you're absolutely correct. It's a system that needs to be abolished. It's not helping anybody here, but it's just a money make it bracket.
Yeah, I don't even think there's a way you can reform this. And then, like you said, the for-profit prisons, it's almost like capitalism was like, oh, they got this going on. Like they're just a parasite every time.
Everywhere. Mhm.
Yeah, every time they can subjugate the masses, or just like a parasite, suck any kind of life out of them, suck any kind of money off of them. They do it. And those for-profit prisons, they got to be just terrible.
It
Horrible.
It is. It is. And
They absolutely are.
It's the same difference, I must say, even kind of in the health system with, I would say, with the nursing facilities, where these
Mm.
facilities are getting so much money, where it costs one individuals to stay there $10,000 a month.
Mm.
And according, if I'm correct, according to Medicare and Medicaid, that a resident has to liquidate all of their personal assets to
Yep.
only to be qualified
Mhm.
for a grant, for a waiver to get into these facilities. But yet, like Walmart, the employees are not getting the pay that they're supposed to receive. Okay.
Mhm.
Still, all in all, I mean, certain people are coming out, you know, with the lesser end of the stick, off the sweat, tears,
Mhm.
and backs of other people, you know.
Mhm.
And here's these individuals who really don't have to take any kind of course in healthcare and science, medicine, AAP, whatever, and they coming out with a whole lot of money.
Right.
Mhm.
So I worked in corrections for 3.5 years. Because I felt like when I went back and did my master's in criminal psychology, because I actually wanted to do prevention. I wanted to work with young kids and try to do criminal prevention, and keep them from God dang, I can't talk. Keep them from joining the street organizations and different things like that. And there was nothing like that around here. So I took what I had learned and combined it with my nursing degree. And I'm like, look, there are so many of these people in prison who literally had like no chance from the time they were born.
Mhm.
They are not there because they are horrible people. They are there
Right.
because of the horrible circumstances that they were in.
Mm-hmm.
And society did nothing to help them. And
Nothing else.
they deserve health care. They deserve to be taken care of. So I worked as director of nursing in a healthcare facility for 3.5 years. And let me tell you what, people would come in and they would be on medication, and I would get notification that, oh, they can't be on that medication anymore because it's too expensive.
Mhm.
And this was a
Wow.
county jail. This wasn't even a prison where they were going to be staying long term. you know.
Wow.
Now, if it was something where they thought that they were going to get out quickly, you know, before their trial or whatever, they would leave their medications alone. But they would ask the family to bring their medications in so that the jail didn't have to pay for an expensive medication. We also housed people like between trials, you know, that would come back for asking for like a relief trial, or, you know, they had filed an appeal and they were coming back for those kind of things. So we had some, and we housed federal prisoners. So we did have some long-term people. And I am not kidding you. There were some where I just put my foot down and said, look, we're not changing it. We're not changing this medication. We're not changing it.
Wow.
You know,
Good for you.
we are not changing it. We are going to continue to give them the medication that they were on, you know.
Wow.
But it is
Yeah.
exactly, you know, it is exactly what you said, Miss Anna. They want to do the cheapest that they possibly can with medication, with food, with everything, because the more they save, the better it looks for them and the more their bonuses are.
Oh, man.
Absolutely.
That
There you
part,
go.
that
You
part.
know, yeah,
There you go.
terrible. It is terrible. I felt like, I don't know. I felt like I was making a difference. I mean, I respected the inmate, and I listened to them, and I took care of their issues. And, you know, when I left there, I missed the inmates a hell of a lot more than I missed everybody else. You know, there's some of them that I'm still in contact with, as a matter of fact. But it's the whole system. I mean, like Sister Anna said, with healthcare too. You know, I'm going through this with my own mom right now. We literally had to sell her house, and we are paying cash for the place that she's at, because you have to liquidate your assets all the way down to having only $2,000.
That's it.
You can only have assets of $2,000.
But pay
And then
$10,000.
yeah, and then Medicaid will kick in and start paying
Right.
things for you.
Yeah.
But as far as the prison
Absolutely.
systems, you're absolutely correct, Lobo and Miss Sister Anna. There is no reforming the prison system. There is no reforming it.
Yeah.
It cannot be. It can't be, because it's all about retribution and punishment. It's not about rehabilitation. And a lot of that I blame on society. You know, I blame a lot of that on society, especially back during the 1980s. You know, part of it is indoctrination, because Reagan comes out and, oh, everybody is now a super predator. You know, they started talking about all the street organizations and all these young kids, and they started calling them super predators. You know, and terrified everybody. Everybody was terrified, and all they wanted was retribution. You know, oh my God, they did this. It was so horrible. You know, there's no reforming them. Just lock them up, punish them, lock them up. You know, and they don't realize that a good portion of the people in our prison system are going to get out one day, and they are going to come back into our societies. And we need to be helping them to change that mindset that society drummed into them, that they weren't good enough and they were predators and they might as well just, you know, do whatever and then go to prison.
Absolutely.
We got to change that, because they're coming back into our society. We should be helping them to become productive citizens.
That's it. And that's the point right there, because even once they come out, they still have to face certain conditions that's unrealistic. And I would say that, you know, because they come out where they have to meet the condition, you got to find a job within a certain amount of months or within a year. But how you going to find a job when the one thing that you can obtain is a driving license? And here, when you live in I'll call it a remote automobile state of America city, like Norfolk, or, you know, out there in Virginia Beach, it's going to be hard to find employment, especially when we have the type of transportation that does not operate on a 24-hour basis, does not operate in certain area where the well-to-do people feels that is encroaching on their privacy, and they don't want these individuals there, or you have to go through certain tolls that cost like $5 or $3 or $5 a day, that adds up to 10 to 20 to hundreds of dollars of a year out of the year. And if these individuals, the former detainees, don't, as meet these certain conditions, that would send them right back to prison. And I'm like, how can we reform someone or help them be productive, like you say, sister, when they have these unrealistic conditions that really increase the recidivism rate and send them right back, and still it is a whole lot of money that's going to be siphoned out of the family, where they can't afford it, where they have to get 2 or 3 jobs, or where they have to say, it's nothing I can do. And then you have a soul that's there where nobody care about that individual. Nobody.
Mhm.
You're right. Sister Veronica, you had your hand up. Go ahead, sister.
Yes, I just wanted to add, because I know we're coming up on time. It's just my usual little spiel that I like to give. Brother Kwame's book, My Search for Answers, Truth, and Meaning, which is his autobiography, is a story of a person who transformed their colonial/criminal mindset to a revolutionary mindset. And so I just wanted to, again, take the opportunity to honor him for sharing his story, and also, pay our respects and honor all our political prisoners and prisoners of war. I myself am, people say, oh, you a bit biased because your fiance is incarcerated. And I say, well, you know what? He wouldn't be my fiance if I didn't have the political mindset that I have, because I wouldn't even give him a time of day. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
But yes, so just wanted to just bring in that piece of it. And we haven't even touched on that, what it does to those of us who are on the outside, going and doing visits, and
Right.
and what that does to the family, the breakdown of the family, our children, what they suffer. And it's just, to me, it is just such an honor to meet somebody such as Brother Kwame, my fiance, countless number of people who are responsible for the education that I'm receiving. There's so much wealth there, and we think about people, and sometimes, we think they don't have nothing to offer. Oh my God, it just boggles me. But yes, just to pay my respects to all our political prisoners of war, and for those that are on their way to transforming their colonial/criminal mindset to the revolutionary mentality.
And if I want to take this moment, I want to thank our current elder for what she had mailed to me. And this is the poster that from our Conrad elder Andy Willis, where
that's beautiful.
Yeah, where it say, we are not trying to save a dying system, we are fighting for a new world. And this
Nice.
is a beautiful
Yes, indeed.
poster. And I
That's
just want to
cool.
quickly, if you don't mind, if I could share to you exactly what Sister Leslie Rose, she said, dear Sister Anna, thanks again for the treats. I'm sending something to you that I thought you might like. This is a poster that Annie, in parentheses, husband, did some years ago. We still have some left. And when I came across it the other day, I thought about our group, Sisters in Struggles. That's what we are. Sister and Veronica. Anyway, keep up the good work. In the education materials, you always bring it to our discussion. Your comrade, Leslie. So
Nice.
I'm so appreciative for this.
Nice.
I'm keep this on my refrigerator until I can get a big frame for it. And I'm
Yes.
going to put these
Sister
logos.
Anna, did you say Elder Andy made that?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that's
Yes,
cool.
it's
That's so
beautiful. And
dope.
I think this young lady right in the poster right here. I think this is Sister Leslie.
I do
But I'm gonna
too.
take a
Look at it.
yeah, I'm gonna take a picture of it, and so this way you can see a clear view, because I can't get rid of this blurry vision background here.
That's amazing.
And so this
Put
way I
it in the
can
chat,
zoom in.
sister. Put it in the chat. I want to see that.
Oh,
Yeah.
definitely. I'm going to put it in the chat, but I want to thank her for this beautiful, priceless present. I
Right?
really appreciate that so much. And it fits so well in what we discussing today. We
Yeah.
are not trying to save a dying system. What are we doing, sisters in struggles? And brothers, we are fighting for a new world. And that's what we need to do.
Yeah.
Amen. That's
power
the
to the
revolutionary
people.
gospel for today.
Yeah.
All power to the people.
Oh,
Power to the
right,
people.
power.
Yeah.
All right, comrades. Well, thank you all so much for joining.
So
That's a really
Lobo,
cool note to end
one
on.
thing.
Oh, go
one
ahead,
thing.
Zombie, please.
I wanna thank you guys, because every time I come in here, I learn so much from all of you.
Oh,
I
Likewise,
really do. I
you
learned
are
so much from all
blessing.
of you. And just like Miss Veronica had her last thing that she always says, I just want to show you guys something. This is for anybody who watches this video. I want you to keep one thing in mind. Let me see if I can do this.
I wanted
Keep
to see what was on there. Yes.
Keep calm and never consent to a search.
I love that. I love that.
Never consent to a search. It's from the National Lawyers Guild. Keep
Good.
calm and never consent to a search.
That's right.
Love
That
it.
is my
That's
that is
right.
my
I
message for
agree.
today. I wore this everywhere in public that I went today.
Love it.
So,
I appreciate it.
yeah, but thank you so much. I am so happy, not only that I found my group, but that we were accepted by you guys and accepted into the Rainbow Coalition, because we are all learning so much from you guys, and we're so honored. We
Yes.
really
Long
are.
live
We're
the Rainbow
very honored.
Coalition.
Yeah.
Yes, and I must say I really appreciate it, because we are really following the blueprint and preserving and carrying the torch for the new generation, where I was unaware of it coming into the Black movement. And I'm really meeting some real hardcore revolutionary who's not romanticizing
Right.
the movement, but who are out there really fighting for our people in the movement. And I just want to say, as far as our brothers Kwame and Hyde, they coming to the East Coast and they asking for your donation. So this way it will assist those comrades like these two brothers who will be on the road, promoting what is our mission and what their work, for everybody to know, everyone to grow on, and everyone to continue in which these brothers have been through a lot and can testify, and frontline soldiers. So by you donating, which also it should be attached to the video for those who will be watching later, please give a donation and help our brothers to spread the work that they do.
Man, well
But
said. We can even share the link too once this gets published. We'll be sure to share that link so that people can contribute. Thank you all so much for being here. I also learned as much
yeah,
from you all as well too. And next week, same time, same back channel.
yeah,
Okay.
definitely. And we need more moderators, because this next chapter, I think, is 10 pages. I may be wrong, but we
Yeah,
need more people to alternate, especially in this chapter, because we have been reading 4 pages or 5 pages, but this is the biggest chapter coming up,
I think
and
you're right.
it's an easy read. and it's an enjoyable read with following a very interesting conversation that embarks on all of our lives where we can share and learn. So please come and have fun with our group. We cool.
Well, and if I'm able to, I'm still on my days off. I go back on Thursday night. If I am here and y'all need somebody to read, I'm more than happy to help with the reading and so yeah, absolutely. This has been
I'm gonna try to
really
make
good.
it. I'm gonna try to make it. Fortunately, since it's at 7:00, I will start doing rounds, and we all know what rounds are and give them But I'm gonna do whatever I can to ping in at least for 5 minutes to probably read a paragraph or two to help out.
Awesome.
I'll be on as well, sis. I'll be on as well.
Oh, good.
All right.
Nice.
Thank you, Lobo, for hosting.
Of course. All right, you all. I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording, and all power to the people. You all stay blessed.
Power
Okay.
to the people.
Okay, you too. Black power, y'all.
All power to the people.
All power to the people.